Thursday, 28th of August, 25. And Nigel Farage was in Scotland yesterday, a day after just announcing Operation Restoring Justice, which is about not letting illegals into the country, which should be the norm, I would have thought, of any country already, but that's where we are. I think the main reason was to announce that the Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament, Graham Simpson, has defected to Reform. So that was a sort of thingy. But he said a few other things. I watched it on YouTube, and it's very good to see them using YouTube and that. Um, I would imagine Zia's oversees a lot of this. Just, well, when I say giving orders, probably. But a lot of people might think, yeah, Reform are really doing well with the thumbnails and that. But it's all low hanging fruit stuff, because all the parties were a shambles, like banks had us online banking, 20 years ago or something. But when it comes to governments and political parties, it's almost as if the internet doesn't exist. They've got their act together a bit now, but still nowhere near as much. I mean, if you only have to get one thing right, it's to get the mic right, because if we can't hear you, it doesn't matter how it looks, how flashy it looks. And Reform seem to be going for flashy stuff, but it doesn't really make it. Well, it's alright, but the main thing is if the mic works. If we can't hear you, it doesn't really matter. And it is interesting because in 2019 I watched the Labour elections to elect their new leader, and one of them said afterwards, we were very disappointed with the online viewing figures. Well, I can tell them that's because whoever was in charge of streaming it on YouTube had made it unlisted. I mean, that's a hard mistake to make because if you're live streaming, usually it is. I think it is listed anyway. Public. That's the whole point of a live stream. So maybe at that time it wasn't. Maybe they just didn't realise. But a 12-year-old realise. I mean, a lot of the things where politicians were using the internet over COVID. Finally they were starting to use the way that the public thing. They were want to view things. But then they were coming on with crap mics, and a lot of them still do have terrible mics, at home and stuff. And then you get the other extreme where they've got really quality mics, but because there's lots of ways it can not function right with the whatever they're using, they end up the other extreme. It's not working because it's too professional. So yeah. Anyway, on to what they were saying about Scotland. So it's got 22,000 views over a day. That's pretty good for a political party, especially with Scotland, because I think a lot of English wouldn't be interested. Um, Not that I blame them, It's just I'm just saying, and it's got 22,000 views. Let's see what it says. Let's check some of the comments. This country needs reform. Awful, pathetic press. Yeah, I was going to say that the journalists were a disgrace. Not just that they were a disgrace because they were just rude. Also, I don't think they represent Scots anymore. Maybe they never did, but it's legacy we're talking about here. Legacy media. I don't think they represent Scots anymore because if you look at who we've elected, it looks as if we're an SNP Labour country, but I think actually we're a Reform country now, and Reform are going to win all the traditional Labour and SNP votes. Because at a recent by-election in Hamilton for the Scottish Parliament, Reform get 26%. I don't think Nigel mentioned that yesterday. He did mention the Hamilton by-election, and he said that even he was surprised at it, but I wasn't surprised at it. I actually thought they were going to win. So they were get 26%. I think SNP got about 29% and Labour get 31%. How Labour won, I've no idea. And there's somebody saying there, I'll be voting reform for the first time. Personally, I think we should be voting on one issue, really. Really, every election now is a referendum on one issue. And the only one you can really choose at the moment is reform, even though they're too soft on it. You've got to vote for them now. Advance UK would be better. I don't agree with the party system, but I would probably vote Advance. Advance or Reform, whoever's going to get in, basically. So, wouldn't it be good if Reform could make Scotland, Wales and England great again? So, to me, it's not about Nigel Farage, it's not about Reform, it's about one issue. They're the least supportive, you could say, of what's the current, of what the situation has been over the last 75 years or whatever on this issue. But I think you've got to look at, do you think Scotland's heading for anarchy or Britain? You know, at the moment we're being told it's going to head for utopia and nothing's going to happen to you if you say it's going to be utopia, you know, whereas if you think it's going to be anarchy, you've got to keep that to yourself, really, because you might get arrested or something, you know. So, yeah, I'm just looking at the replies here. Yeah, Graham Simpson, he was a Tory. I mean, he's been there for quite a few years now, 15 years or something. To me, it's no big deal. I'm not even really going to talk about that. Like I say, I think reform's going to sweep the board all over Britain, really, because Brits have always been told you can't vote for reform or you're a bad person, you know, and especially in Scotland they do that because John Swinney just had two anti-reform meetings of the Scottish elders, maybe you want to call it whatever you want to call it. Everyone was invited except Reform, and the Tories were invited, but they didn't go. So well done the Tories. But it was all, you know, all the leaders of all the other parties, plus the Council of Elders, whoever they are. I don't know who they are. Twice they met, and it was to stop Scots voting Reform, basically. And they called Reform. The first press conference they done about it, he said Reform with the far R. But then he backtracked on that. But I think he said it again later, you know. So he's saying to Scots, you can't vote for them or you are far R. Well, in Hamilton, 26% voted, you know, and I think it's a waste of time even trying to stop it. John Swinney says it. He'll do everything he can to try and stop it. Stop what? The voters voting, you know. So, yeah, I think Scotland's really gone. I mean, Wales has already really gone mostly. It seems half and half now between it and Plaid Cymru. You've got a bit of legacy Labour voting in the inner cities or whatever, but Reform is really big there now, I think. I think they're going to win the Senate next year, or be the biggest party. Here's some notes I took. Reform in Scotland. I was just trying the Google Keep Drawing thing there again, just to try it. So, yeah, Graham Simpson, MSP, defects to Reform from Tories. So Reform are getting MSP. At the moment, in polls, they're like 18% for regional voting for the Scottish Parliament next year. So 18%, you know, that is a big chunk. I think it's going to be even higher by then. I think it'll be like 25%. It depends. At some point, it's going to tip totally. I mean, recently with the Operation Raise the Colours, where everyone's raising flags, British flags or English flags, there was even a video of a Celtic, someone dressed in a Celtic top, putting a Union Jack up in the lamppost, presumably in Glasgow or something, I don't know. But yeah, it's going to go to that. I mean, Celtic and Rangers traditional fans are going to be united, you know, on one issue. Yeah, Nigel was saying that Glasgow is now the capital for Seekers. And I think the main reason for that is words get out on the internet and that Glasgow is a very soft touch when it comes to housing. Because after people have come here by dinghy or whatever, or visa overstays is the main way that people come here, as when they claim, that's the ones that claim for, put a claim in. I mean, there's a lot that don't put a claim in. He was saying that Glasgow's now the capital. At the moment, it's got about 4,000 who have come here and are now in the housing waiting list, and they get priority, I think, because they're homeless. Because what happens to these people is, for a few weeks they get put in a 4-star hotel, etc. But then, basically, once their claim's in or whatever, and it's in the process, most of them will, Labour will make most of them British. They've got they've defined their own housing accommodation, so quite a few of them probably just end up in the streets. But the words get out that Glasgow's a soft touch because the Glasgow Council got a special policy. I think they must make a priority anyone who's homeless, something like that. So on the Reddit and on the TikTok and all that, the word's probably Glasgow is the softest touch in Britain, probably. That's how they see it. And so, and Nigel was saying that soon, he thinks, the legacy journalists were saying Scots support what's happening, etc. But Nigel was saying, well, we'll see about Glasgow and that now. He was saying it might not have changed so far, but you're going to see changes. Well, I can assure him it has changed. Every Glaswegian can say that it's changed. I mean, up until about 1997, the population of Glasgow was going down. Since then, it's went up every year. I think over the last 10 or 15 years, we've gained in 50,000 or something. I guess it was under 500,000, now it's up to like 550,000 or something. But everyone can see Glasgow's changed, and so it's already happened. And not just Glasgow, Inverness, Dundee. I mean, that video that's going on just now with the girl that was holding up weapons or whatever, that's Dundee. Aberdeen, Fort William, Newton Stewart, everywhere really. So really, and this is mainly because our councils they've got the sanctuary endorsement by the sanctuary charity. A lot of the councils, or it's just Glasgow University, that sort of thing. Because in the US they've got actually, I don't know what they're called actually, official sanctuary cities, but they've got the same concept here, run by a charity over the last 15 years or whatever, and then Glasgow is a sanctuary place for this charity. It's got the gold award or whatever it is. So yeah, so I think this is why Hamilton maybe 26% voted there, and like I say, Reform are like 18% in general for here, 16%, 18% from what I've seen, and I think that will just keep going up and up. It'll become the dominant one. I think they're beating the Tories now, really. And the journalists were disgraceful, the legacy journalists. I think they thought they were representing Scots, i.e. SNP and Labour voters, but really aren't. Even the Daily Mail guy was terrible, the Scottish correspondent, because he said something like, you look a bit angry or something. I mean, it was primary school stuff, trying to intimidate somebody, or I don't know. And I think Nigel always hits the spot quite a lot. I mean, I'm not a total fan of Nigel by any means, but sometimes they were saying, because we're constantly told that we need new people to be the workers. But Nigel was saying that, well, I don't know if he said it yesterday, but GDP per capita hasn't went up over the last 15 years when we've had the biggest changes ever, especially the Boris waves. Possibly it's going down per capita, and as Katie Lamb said yesterday in an X post, something like, the growth we had is actually junk growth. Growth per capita hasn't went up at all, it's maybe went down a bit even, and that's per person. And also the people coming over, once they're here, do they bring their grandparents? Is there a sort of chain migration goes on? Do they bring their grandparents, older people who are going to use the NHS or whatever? And apparently, a lot of people are saying that a lot aren't actually in employment of these people. I think Boris gave about 70,000 social care visas over, and only about actually 12,000 of them actually ended up using the social care visa thing. I don't know what it is, but it's the sort of thing that nobody's allowed to contest what the people are saying, but we're not allowed to find out are these things actually myths, because people will call us names if we do. You're not even allowed to question it. So Nigel puts good phrases out. He says things, let's have a debate. Absolutely. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I said, let's have a debate on things. Let's talk about them, because Nigel said last year, somebody asked him on GB News, are you worried about being arrested about one of your ex-posts or whatever? And he said yes, and he was right to say that, because at that time we were living in a real Stasi state. We still are under gear. We're really living in a state where you can get arrested, like East Germany or that sort of thing. Yeah, and Nigel was also saying, as I said, like AI and automation are going to come along, and whole sectors are going to be unemployed. I mean, I think it's Aldi down Amazon have already done it down in London, but Aldi now are trying out shops where there's no staff basically, and probably security guard. That's about it. And you're going to have over in a moment, Tesla in Austin, Texas are trying out robo-taxis. For a while there, Elon was showing the area where robo-taxis are functioning, and it looked like a phallic symbol or something, so he was making that comical. But that was only a month ago or something, and now it's no longer a phallic symbol, it's spreading. So you're going to have taxis, automated driving. That was probably going to take away all the driving. You're going to have automated warehouses. So we're actually going to have a situation where there's going to be less and less employment. And actually, the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates say this, even though they are probably in favour of people coming to America. At the same time, they're giving the message, those two, that we're going to have a lot of unemployment because there's no work. So what are people going to do with their time? So yeah, all that. So Nigel says the right things, and I'm guessing that maybe Zia Yusuf has told him to push this sort of thing. I've said this, I've thought this for a long time. Zia's probably now pushing him, but I wouldn't rely on Zia, because Zia's going to be excellent on illegal, but I think he's going to be very poor on legal. Because for a start, Reform are wanting to bring the golden visa back, basically. Which I'm totally against. That's like, you don't get the point, really. I mean, Abramovich was a golden visa. So, yeah, that's my notes, really. Let's see what Google Gemini says. Yeah, and another great thing is that Rupert Law and Ben Habib and the France party are there to criticise Nigel straight away on X, etc., and on YouTube. So you've got all this pressure on Reform, because this is actually a change. The Operation Restoring Justice, as they call it, but Operation Zero Illegals, really, is which was announced yesterday. I think a year ago, Nigel done an interview with Steve Erdington, and he said it was impossible to remove them all now. Now he's saying that he's got a 5-year plan. So they've been pushed to that, as Rupert Law calls it, the online right, but I would say it's Rupert, Ben Habib, it's a pincer movement, really. So it's really good to have them to thing the Reform, because Reform are sitting in all the council seats at the moment, because council by-elections are a very important way to pressure the government, because we live in a very undemocratic society where we only get to vote every 5 years. which is ridiculous. You know, it's sort of Putinesque, really. I think in Russia it's maybe every 4 years even, so they're maybe even better, you know. So council by-elections are the main way that the public can put their point across, and using YouGov polls, etc., which Rupert Law is using a lot now with Restore UK. They're commissioning polls because they realise how important polls are. I've said that for a long while. Everyone should join YouGov and panel base. It's not called panel base anymore, I don't know, but should join these. And then in the political things, they should just pick reform, no other one. And they should also, when asked what 3 things are you worried about politically, just pick the one issue. Don't pick any others. Don't dilute it, because that's what Labour want. Because Labour have even diluted this thing here, deflected, you know. But anyway, I'm talking about the Scotland thing. Yeah, it was mainly about Graham Simpson going, you know. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. It says he's the first sitting MSP in the Scottish Parliament reforms, but actually I think it's the second, because I think Michelle Ballantyne, some journalist was making that point yesterday. I think it was a Daily Mail Scottish correspondent, who then went on to say, you look a bit angry, you know, it was primary school stuff. So I don't know about that, but so Simpson said he'd already decided not to stand for the Tories in the next election, but he sees reform as a fresh start, so he's going to stand for them. So he's 61, by the way, so in case you're wondering. And reforms Hollywood ambitions. That's the Scottish Parliament. Yeah, I think they'll get maybe, like I say, I think they'll get maybe 22% of the vote, 25%, maybe even more. They might be the top party. They're vetting around 200 candidates across the country, especially in the regional vote, because a former Scottish MP who's standing for Holyrood next year says reform are a danger, and he said in his poor area, well, he didn't say poor, well, he did in a way, but he talks to people, he goes around talking to people, and one guy said, one SNP voter said he's going to vote SNP in the constituency vote and reform in the regional vote, and that's the sort of thing I would do. But now I wouldn't vote left at all, even though I'm naturally left. I would say for a lot of things, not all. I don't agree with left and right. You know, I'm picking mix on issues. I mean, on this issue, I would be regarded as I couldn't be any more far, you know. But I don't mind really, because I think possibly we could be heading for anarchy if I'm allowed to think that. You know, I don't know. So yeah, Scottish leadership. Yeah, no, reform's going to be big in Scotland, I think. So yeah, he's talking about Glasgow there. So he was saying about that. He was saying a centre. He referred to Glasgow as that word capital of the UK, and claimed that if his party were in government, illegals would not be in the cities or in the streets yet, because he says they're going to be detained, which seems a very normal, sensible thing to me. It should be the norm already, you know, like always. He also appeared to roll back on previous statements about that. But he said also that women and children he's not even discussing at the moment. So he's made a terrible mistake here, because what's going to happen is, because what people don't seem to understand is that the young men that are coming over, they're the anchor for the family, you know. You know, they're going to bring the family tree over, including the grandparents. They can get on the NHS and stuff, and so it doesn't really matter that they're young men. Well, what's going to happen now is probably the young women will be sent over as the anchor, or even the children, you know. So, and a lot of women and children do come over at the moment, you know. It might only be 10% or 15%, but that's a lot, you know. I mean, apparently the highest cases for seekers over the last year were from Pakistan, and 90% of them were visa overstays. So they're either coming as students or just coming to visit family who have been let in before, and just staying and then making a claim. these communities will probably get good lawyers, lawyer network, etc. You know, they'll be looking for loopholes. Eventually, I think Labour and Tory governments just give in. Really, do they just give up? So yeah, this is a change for them. But to say women and children, and Ben Habib's already pointed this out, and so is Rupert. So that's not good enough. He's going to have to change that, and he probably will actually within the next year, I would say. And he was saying that the Barnett Farmland Scottish economy. He says in Barnett Farmland, let's have a debate. And as I say, that's all I'm asking for everything. Barnett Farmland, fair enough. Even Mr. Barnett said it wasn't being used in the way he anticipated. It was a back of a cigarette packet thing. It was 1979 when it was formulated, and that was when Scotland was having a devolution vote where they had to get over 60%. It might have even been two-thirds to have a devolved parliament. I think it was a Labour government done the referendum, and they got over 50%, but they had to go over 60%. So yeah. I mean, personally, I think Scots. I think the journalists were trying to make it as if SNP and Labour voters are not going to vote for him, but I think they are on this one issue. And Nigel was saying it as if Scotland hasn't changed. It has changed. I mean, I think at the last census, I think 2022, and that was before Boris's waves, which are the biggest changes ever. I think on the census, Scottish natives, if you want to call them that, were 79%. I think a lot of Labour and SNP voters who hear that will be shocked. 79%, and that was before the Boris waves. So I would guess that's down to 70% now or something. I think another 8%, another 6% were European, and then the other 15% were other. So that other is probably now, I don't know, it must be about 20% now. And because nobody's asking why these people want to leave their countries or whatever. Nobody ever asks that. So yeah, so Scotland has changed and all that. I think there's going to be a panic change to reform from Labour, SNP, and Tories are already gone, really, in Scotland. So yeah, okay, that's all I've got to say for that just now. Okay, bye. All you can do just now is vote for them or advance when they come along, especially if you vote Labour, SNP, etc.